working for over 60 years to power your life. Nebraska Public Power District, Pinnacle Bank, and First National Beatrice Bank proudly support the National Park Service in its mission to tell the stories of the American homesteader through their financial support of this program. In the spirit of George Norris, who championed the cause of the rural citizen by bringing public electricity to millions and preserving homesteader history by helping to create Homestead National Monument of America, Nebraska Public Power District, Pinnacle Bank, and First National Beatrice Bank continue this vision by finding new ways to fund and fuel your dreams.
Då jag vill gå och mitt säkerhetsskyddes. Man har gett
Our connection to the earth was a very sacred relationship.
I'm of the Blackfeet tribe.
We are members of the Oglala Minikoju bands of the Ocheti Sakowin.
My father's cattle. My mother is Potawatomi.
My father was a Mandan, my mother was a Heradza.
Winnebago, Pawnees,
Choctaws,
Comanches,
Nez Perce,
Cheyenne,
Assiniboines,
Seminole.
Our range ran from west of Columbus, Nebraska, all the way across the Missouri and the Mississippi, all the way to Des Moines, Iowa.
Traditionally, our land started from the headwaters of the Saskatchewan River, back around Jackson Hole country to what we call the backbone of the world, the Rocky Mountains.
That is my ancestral area, is the Matnaska-Nakotna area.
We have a responsibility to this land.
With an understanding that you don't own it personally.
It was just part of the creation of God that is put here for people to utilize.
These are the values that we learned as a people of nature.
You cannot own the land on which the people walk.
The French sold Louisiana Purchase to the United States government.
We never put our land up for sale.
It wasn't Francis' land to sell.
Naupi, Wadamani Tahu.
A culture that creates a sense of value that's very different from other cultures. Land and land ownership become a cultural dream, that the people who have land are in fact the noble people.
It's a manifest destiny of the United States to expand from ocean to ocean, and obviously the expansion is westward. From the moment that Thomas Jefferson acquires the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, the idea is to create what he calls an empire for liberty.
There's so much land, what are we going to do with all the land? How do we give the land away? Should it be a slave state or a free state? This conversation about homesteading, that started with Thomas Jefferson is still going on well into the 1850s. Lincoln knew what he was doing all along. He plainly stated that I'm in favor of the Homestead Act and cutting the wild lands into parcels so that every poor man may have a home. He signed it on May 20th of 1862 and making it an effective date of January 1st of 1863.
Passing this legislation meant to inspire, to encourage the settlement of this area that's been crossed over in the past.
Homesteading was not exclusively a Midwestern or a Great Plains phenomenon. It was around for 123 years. New territories and states keep being added.
The Dakotas, Wyoming,
Florida,
Idaho, Colorado, Nevada,
Utah,
Oregon, and Washington,
to the Pacific, California.
This land eventually would be turned over to homesteaders.
There seemed to be a limitless expanse of land that was there for the taking.
This Homestead Act kind of was a little mystery to us. We couldn't figure it out why all of a sudden these people said, oh yeah, the government says we can have this land now.
As the ebb and tide of power starts shifting, you see the erosion of our lands through the treaties.
The relationship between the United States government and the 500 nations of American Indian tribes was one of treaty negotiations.
Well, these were agreements on paper. They were often not honored by the U.S. government and certainly not enforced.
Indian policy was being made up as it was necessary for the acquisition strategies.
There were 5 changes, and it was always the let's make a deal crew.
None of that treaty language was ever kept with us.
The treaties were not honored.
Those treaties don't mean nothing. They can shoot you right through that paper.
Because we were losing land, and we were losing because of the treaties.
And when the government starts coming in, opening up the territories, we tried to stop that. The realization is that they probably had more firepower than us. And so they give us this reservation saying, oh yeah, this is yours by God, as long as the grass grows, as long as the river flows. Well, apparently the river stopped flowing, and apparently the grass stopped growing because they knocked that out in us too.
The settlers said, we want them out of here. We don't want any more Indians here.
So they pushed real hard, and finally it came about that the Otoe, Missouri were forced to leave their land.
The cattle were to be moved out.
The Blackfeet,
the Assiniboine,
Iona,
the Mandan.
We were moved literally at the point of a gun.
That was the last we ever saw of our home as a united people.
If you can imagine going out in the middle of nowhere on the prairie and you can't see a tree or a creek or any means of survival whatsoever, and pitch a tent and just try to make a living there.
The planes took off back to Anchorage and got smaller and smaller in the sky, and I realized, well, this is it. I thought, boy, am I doing the right thing here.
My great-grandfather immigrated over here in 1874 from Edinburgh, Scotland.
One day he came in and they announced that we were going to Alaska to homestead, and I knew he meant it.
My grandfather, Adam Wallowine, homesteaded here in 1910.
These aren't the people who went to California looking for gold. These are the people who said, I want a place to call my own. And they were going to build it from the ground up.
People from all corners of the world could come to the United States and be homesteaders.
People are coming to the promised land. They're coming to the land of milk and honey. And their belief was that they were coming out to the new Eden.
A farmer's dream.
Really lavish brochure.
$5 will get you to the promised land.
Rain follows the plow.
Throw a seed on the ground and it'll pop up in front of your eyes.
The promise of free land.
Hundreds of thousands of people come across the oceans.
They came from Northern Europe.
The railroads were the great promoters.
There were many, many different groups of people that were coming out and staking claims to homesteads.
He was following his girlfriend.
Former slaves. To African Americans, Nicodemus was the symbol that it can be done.
During the Second World War, they wanted to get out of Germany.
What it was people literally trying to create the American dream for themselves.
People got off the train and they went out and found out where there was land, and that's where they settled.
I think he chose this location because if you can imagine this with no trees, you could see 360 degrees, anything coming from any direction.
Where you see the trees along there is a creek, and there's some excellent springs.
We had good drainage, a little creek down there running beside it.
The thing that was the clincher for me was that everyone else was staking about 50 or 60 miles west of here on a different river. And there was no one on this river.
He probably felt like, I could sit up here and I can look at all of this. This is all mine, and by golly, I'm a baron too.
Once they selected a place, they would go to the land office and file a claim to get something started and then develop some kind of shelter.
This is the original homestead house that had to be built to prove up.
Well, the first 3 years they just lived in a little tar paper rough shack.
That's where they lived in a dugout before they built the cabin.
Dad was actually born in a sod house. As I remember him talking about as a little boy laying in the bed and seeing the bull snakes in the summertime would come up to get cool in the roof of the sod house.
Well, I built it all by hand and human muscles.
She had gone out and homesteaded in Arizona. There's this little wood tar paper shack out on what looks like desert land, but it's a homestead.
And then you get into the clearing and agricultural requirements of the Homestead Act after that.
You cut the trees right here and they peel the bark off and then they stack them up right in the middle of the forest. So this has all been cleared.
It's like the old West, but it was just in the 1940s, 1950s.
That was where we cleared 10 acres and sowed it in seed.
This is what used to be the garden. It's about an acre. They used to grow a lot of cabbage. Lots of cabbage and potatoes were the main crops.
We had raspberries, blueberries all around in here. And if you could beat the bears to them, you could pick enough to go through the winter.
My grandpa then started plowing, I think towards the south end.
He broke up 30 acres, and the next year he broke up 50 more acres, and the next year he would break up 20 more acres. And all he had to do that with would be just 1 or 2 bottom plow pulled by 3 or 4 horses.
You had to work very hard to turn the raw land into a cultivated place.
And it wasn't something that just the father working out in the field did. It took the whole family.
I learned to chop wood from Mom.
She did the cooking for all the operation.
People who are settling these Great Plains are developing new strains of crops to adapt to the drier areas.
The work is never ending.
He hired all kinds of people to work for him, picking rock, helping him break this land.
They needed to have the support of family unit and even a larger community unit to really make it work.
You had to be half nuts to do that much work.
It's just a miracle that this worked out at all.
With homesteaders coming in, we start running into people saying, no, this is my territory. This is my place now. You can't come on here.
They put up these little fences and say, well, you can't come in here no more.
The Homestead Act was just the beginning.
Take us off of land that we had owned and lived forever to very small acres on a reservation. And then even when we thought, okay, no more, please no more, then they create the Dawes Act.
That took away more land. Allotted each Indian enrolled at the time 160 acres.
And whatever's left opens up to homesteading to white people.
Basically, it goes from the Allotment Act to what occurred here in Oklahoma was the land run.
Well, you see these guys running out on horses and marking out pieces of land, and
they were coming more and more and more, coming like waves.
The government made the mistake of saying it's wide open and it's free.
The Poncas witnessed the land run. They talk about it, and they just thought it was, crazed thing that was going on. The Ponca tribe lost approximately 70% of that land.
That was the start of a significant loss of our culture.
They couldn't maintain their tribal ways.
It took our kids, which was the most important things to us,
away from their families, white man education, and forbade them to even speak their language, so that when they came home after 5 or 6 years, they could not speak to their parents, and so you couldn't communicate with your own father and mother.
They were separated.
Our women were hungry, our children were hungry, and we couldn't go hunt. We had to depend on the government to get us food. It wasn't just a loss of land. It was a loss of culture, it was a loss of religion, it was a loss of the spirituality, it was a loss of a lot of things, loss of our families, a loss of our societies, a loss of our clans. It was a lot of loss. It wasn't just the land.
The lands, as many people found out, just weren't adapted to even the kinds of dry land farming that became popular.
And so you have people hoping for this rain, and there's not a cloud in sight, and the crop is dying in front of your eyes, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It was incredibly dry.
Little rain, cold winters.
Wind chills as low as 90 below zero.
Howling winds.
Snow drifts.
I've seen the temperature change 100 degrees over a few hours.
Among the most challenging environmental conditions you can find anywhere.
Terrible flu epidemic.
The loneliness.
Wildfires and grasshoppers and more.
The fire started just right about where you're standing there and spread in the grass.
All of that lost, I think, would be the bitterest pill of all.
Adversity builds character. And I would have to say that everybody that came out here and stayed had to have a lot of character.
Ones that stayed here I admire for sticking it out. They somehow improvised and made a living here.
$270 million acres of land were actually given away through the homesteading program. The fact that as many people succeeded as did is a testament to really the tenacity and the courage that these people had.
One day the title just appeared in the mail. That was a happy day.
Then when you got that patent, you knew what you had put in on the land here, building a cabin, making a garden, clearing the land was all worth it.
A truly distinct American culture was forged.
A fiery sense of that pioneer spirit.
Sort of American can-do spirit of individualism.
I think it's a character that really defined America.
The Homestead Act really, at some point and somehow, affected nearly every aspect of life in this country.
We've expanded to about 10,000 acres. We raise beef cattle, peas, canola, camelina.
Our operation is maybe 13,000 acres.
Right at 1,500 acres. Approximately 4,000 acres.
Dryland corn, some irrigated corn.
Homeland. They try to break us, but we haven't broken.
For me, this old reservation site, this place where our people are buried, where our people are at peace, holds great meaning.
Always fighting to preserve who we are as a people.
Was my dream, and it did come true in every single one of those circumstances.
Our dream was to prove up on the land that we found on, and it would be ours.
The dream that I have would be for my family to continue on. That's the most proudest thing I am of this farm and my family.
I don't feel like I own it. I feel like I'm just here to take care of it and pass it along, hopefully better than I.
So proud to be able to stand here and call this mine, for even if it is for just a little while.
It really belongs to our future, for all your life, for all the days of your lives, and the lives of your children and their children.